Hello, Bible readers. It is Friday, November 20th. We're reading from 1 Samuel 28 to 31, Acts chapter 8, 26 through 9, 19. There's a lot to get to, so let's jump right in. In 1 Samuel, this first story, the ghost of Samuel. I do not remember this story. This is a strange story. But what we can take from it, I think, is quite interesting. As my commentary says, the hostile forces that face us are definitely different from Saul's Philistines, but no less deadly. We too are assaulted by media-driven consumer values that erode our sense of self-worth, reduce our sexuality to a marketing commodity, and create a deadly acceptance of violent behavior in streets, schools, homes, as well as between nations. People of faith should be able to respond with resources of life in the face of such death-dealing crises, but too often we, like Saul, lose touch with the future as God's future. Saul is in a desperate situation. He turns to the wrong people, right? So this is a cautionary tale for us in today's day. And then we see someone, David, who responds to crises of his own faithfully. There's a deep contrast between these two men, right? So in chapter 29, David gets out of having to do battle against his own people. You know, as he fell in with the Philistines, we must have wondered, like, well, how's this going to work when they go to war against David's own people, who then he becomes king over? Like, this is how. So they basically kick him out of camp. And then in chapter 30, we've got David winning against the Amalekites, but it's not about his winning. That's not what the story is about. The story is about his character amidst crisis. That character is what's being celebrated more than a simple victory. And then, of course, chapter 31, the death of Saul and all his sons and men, disaster complete, right? Like there's a bow on Saul. Acts, two of the most famous and important stories in the whole book of Acts. First, we've got the Ethiopian eunuch story. I've never really placed as much importance on, and I think I should have in the past as I've preached about this before, the eunuch is a really important person. This isn't just because he's not a powerful person within, Jerusalem or among Jews, but this is a person in charge of the queen's treasury, riding in a chariot. He's got a driver. He's obviously wealthy. He's reading, this Isaiah text. And so it's important to understand what an important person he'd be, because it's not uncommon for a persuasive text like Acts is meant to be. I mean, Luke is thinking, I want this to convert people. I want this to bring people to God. And so it would make sense for Luke to emphasize how his claims have been accepted by respectable, powerful people. It's almost like an endorsement. We've already seen Philip characterized as a prophet up to this point in the book of Acts, as much of what Philip does is a lot like how Jesus did things, and prophets before. Filled with this, these are the three stereotypical things that Luke would say about someone to say they're a prophet. Filled with the Spirit, does signs and wonders, proclaims the word of God. Like, those are the three things that happen for people who are called to be prophets. If we had already read 1st and 2nd Kings, we would also be able to make sense of a lot more of what we read about Philip, especially in this section, as Philip just like evaporates and then goes somewhere else by the Spirit. Like, what's going on here? Well, this kind of thing happens in 1st and 2nd Kings. These are obvious allusions to Elijah, the most powerful prophet of the Old Testament, if you don't count Moses. But in 1st and 2nd Kings, Elijah is addressed by an angel, like Philip is. Elijah is carried from place to place by the Spirit. Elijah even has a story where he's running down the road with the chariot of a powerful person, just like Philip is doing here. So by reading the Old Testament, when we get to 1st and 2nd Kings, let's remember this part of Acts and the stories of Philip. The other thing about the road scene. Does it remind you at all of Jesus on the road to Emmaus? This is Philip on the road to Gaza, opening the scriptures to someone. Just an interesting allusion to Jesus as well. Last thing, these Christian missionaries, they're just trying to keep up with the Spirit of God, right? The actions of the book of Acts are not being pushed by the apostles' choices. They're being pushed by the Spirit. And that's important to recognize from Luke as well. Okay, last, Acts 9, 1 to 19, Saul's conversion. How can I only give this 30 seconds, but I'll try. The turning of a Pharisee persecutor into the apostle to the Gentiles. This is as dramatic an event as any in the history of Christianity. So how does Luke explain it and talk about it? Well, he'll do so not just once, he'll do it 3 times, because he knows this is a story worth his attention multiple times so we can understand it from multiple angles. We're never told why Paul persecutes. His personality, his motivations, they are not Luke's priority. Paul's just another character in a larger story that Luke is trying to tell, and that story is that God keeps God's promises. And here God calls another prophet, Paul. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.